Britain's Falklands operation hinged on one thing: HMS Hermes. Without it, Britain would be left with no base to wage war from. Argentina had a simple yet daunting strategy: take out the British carriers and win the war. On Argentina's Independence Day, May 25th, 2 Super Etendards took to the skies. They carried their last 3 Exocets, lethal French missiles, designed to obliterate even the mightiest warships. With raw speed and grit, these fighters blindsided the British carrier battle group, launching their deadly cargo. Missiles struck, flames soared, and seawater rushed into the gaping hull. But as the smoke settled, HMS Hermes stood unscathed. The Argentinians had obliterated British cargo ship SS Atlantic Conveyor instead. A grave blunder for Argentina, a severe blow for Britain. Major General Moore dubbed it the gravest loss of the war. But rumors of a sinister twist emerged years later. Evidence hinted that HMS Hermes, known for numerous scandals, might have deliberately lured the missiles to the cargo ship, sacrificing it to save her own skin. HMS Hermes was part of a peculiar class of British carriers caught at the crossroads of history. The United Kingdom developed the Centaur-class aircraft carriers for the Royal Navy during World War II. They were conceived as the final iteration of the 1942 design light fleet carrier, aimed at operating higher performance aircraft than the preceding Majestic-class carriers. They were designed for a world at war, and when the war suddenly ended before they could be finished, their fate hung in the balance. Only HMS Hermes, the last ship of the class, was fitted as a modern fixed-wing carrier. The end of the war dramatically stalled the production of this class of warships, but the more time passed, the more they became outdated and had to be modernized even before leaving the dry dock, leading to a grueling, unending cycle that pushed their construction for several years. Some of the carriers, such as Albion and Bulwark, were converted into helicopter assault ships, known as commando carriers, due to their inability to operate modern aircraft. The construction of HMS Hermes commenced, with the ship being laid down by Vickers Armstrong at Barrow-in-Furness as HMS Elephant on June 21, 1944. However, the construction was suspended in 1945 as the war came to an end. In a peacetime economy, the continuous development of war assets became much more difficult to achieve, and the project stalled. Work on the ship resumed in 1952 to clear the slipway, and the hull was launched on February 16, 1953, while still not entirely finished. The vessel remained a work in progress until 1957, marking over a decade since its construction had begun. During the long construction period, extensive modifications were made to the ship in a desperate effort to keep its specifications up to date with the latest naval technology, which had long surpassed what was available during World War II. The modifications included the installation of a massive Type 984 searchlight 3D radar, a fully angled deck with a deck edge lift, and steam catapults. These modifications made HMS Hermes resemble the reconstructed aircraft carrier Victorious more than the other ships in the Centaur class. The ship finally entered service as HMS Hermes on November 18, 1959. In its initial years of service, HMS Hermes operated Supermarine Scimitar, de Havilland Sea Vixen, and Fairey Gannet fixed-wing aircraft, alongside Westland Whirlwind helicopters. The carrier seemed to be plagued with bad luck, which some attributed to its age and prolonged construction process. On November 16, 1962, while cruising off the Pembrokeshire coast in Wales, a helicopter from Hermes carrying 2 members of Parliament crashed. While flying at a height of 1,000 feet, the aircraft suffered a total engine failure and came down into the sea. It came down slowly under auto-rotation, but on striking the rough water, it immediately rolled over, submerging the door. It sank in less than a minute. The Hermes crew reacted as fast as they could, sending a rescue helicopter. In a dramatic and intense rescue operation, the British servicemen were able to rescue most of the fallen aircraft's crew and one of the members of Parliament. Still, another MP and an RAF officer were lost in the crash. Despite the early setbacks, HMS Hermes continued to be seen with hope by the Royal Navy, and it was considered a promising candidate to be the platform for the operation of F-4 Phantom aircraft in 1963. Still, after years of trials, Hermes would fail again when the ship's flight deck was deemed too short, and its arresting gear and catapults were not powerful enough to recover or launch the American aircraft. It was another blunder in Hermes' career. The ship seemed condemned not to meet the aspiring goals its designers had planned for her and the other vessels of her class. The Centaur-class carriers were quickly becoming obsolete, and Hermes struggled to find a role as a fixed-wing aircraft carrier when her flight deck was too small to accommodate most current aircraft. That is when a destiny-altering decision was made for the aircraft carrier. Once a proud bearer of fixed-wing aircraft, Hermes was marked to transform into a commando carrier like her sisters, a platform designed to ferry the Royal Marines into the thick of battle and deploy combat helicopters at a moment's notice. Such carriers, reminiscent of the U.S. Navy's LHA, were envisioned as swift, mobile naval bases. Her transformation began in 1971. Nestled in No. 10 Dock in Devonport Dockyard, she underwent a surgical overhaul. Arresting cables, catapults, and the massive 3D radar were stripped away. In their place, landing crafts were embedded, barracks for 800 troops erected, and her deck now bore around 20 Westland Sea King helicopters. As the 80s dawned, the carrier faced another pivotal update to meet its role as an anti-submarine ship. In a refit from 1980 to June 1981 in Portsmouth, a 12-inch ski jump emerged on her deck, and she was endowed with the means to operate the iconic BAE Sea Harriers. Just as the changes were made, the 1981 Defense Review by the British government marked her for decommissioning. The ship was no longer a valuable asset for the British military, and was selected to be scrapped. It seemed the controversial ship was destined to end its career in humiliation without ever seeing combat. Fate, however, had other plans. Just as the ink was drying on her retirement papers, the Falklands War erupted. In the face of the Argentine invasion, HMS Hermes was propelled to the front lines as the flagship of the British forces. The sudden conflict took place over the disputed Falkland Islands, South Georgia, and South Sandwich Islands. Argentina had long claimed sovereignty over these territories, and on April 2, 1982, Argentine forces invaded and occupied the Falklands. In response, the UK dispatched a naval task force to retake the islands. With only 3 days of preparation, Hermes steamed south, her deck lined with 12 Sea Harrier FRS-1 attack aircraft and 18 Sea King helicopters. The journey saw her arsenal swell further, with the addition of more Sea Harriers, RAF Hawker Siddeley Harrier GR3s, and a sea of Sea Kings. Argentina was counting on the remote nature of the islands being a massive advantage for their military, as it meant they could deploy air, sea, and land forces much more quickly and effectively than the British response. But they did not expect HMS Hermes. The Sea Harriers operating from HMS Hermes were crucial in establishing air superiority over the islands and in defending the task force from Argentine aircraft. They played a key role in sinking Argentine naval vessels, intercepting enemy aircraft, and providing close air support to ground troops. The presence and capabilities of HMS Hermes, alongside its sister ship, HMS Invincible, allowed the British to project air power over the remote islands and were instrumental in the British military's success during the war. Suddenly, HMS Hermes, the ship about to be scrapped, became an invaluable asset for Britain and one that could define the fate of the war. Britain could not afford to lose the ship to a sneaky Argentinian airstrike, so Hermes hovered at the edge of the Falklands, careful to avoid the menacing Argentine Air Force. The senior officer leading the British naval forces was Admiral Woodward, stationed on board HMS Hermes. He was acutely aware of the vulnerabilities of the carriers, Hermes and Invincible, to an Argentine air assault. Woodward had candidly shared with fellow commanders a stark truth. Significant damage to either Hermes or Invincible could compel the British to withdraw from their campaign in the Falklands. The danger was palpable. Argentina boasted Exocet missiles, cutting-edge anti-ship projectiles capable of sinking even the mightiest vessels. Regrettably, neither the Hermes nor the Invincible had defenses against missile attacks. Fortunately, British intelligence indicated that Argentina's stock of this daunting weapon was dwindling. On May 4th, they had initiated an assault on the carriers, but had erroneously struck the destroyer HMS Sheffield instead. While the destroyer met its watery grave as it was being towed post-attack, the carriers remained unscathed. By May 25th, Woodward left nothing to chance in safeguarding his flagship vessels. He established a layered defense, ranging from 2 anti-aircraft picket ships near Pebble Island, designed as a missile trap, to a line of chaff-equipped fleet auxiliary ships situated west of his carriers, acting as decoys. Moreover, British agents had successfully infiltrated Argentine air bases. If the Super Etendards were to take off, the British would be forewarned. On May 25th, 2 Argentine Super Etendards ascended, targeting the British carriers. Woodward was promptly informed of their mobilization by British Special Forces, readying his fleet for the impending confrontation. However, the Argentine pilots had a strategy of their own. They charted a northeastern path, bypassing Woodward's defenses, to meet an Air Force KC-130 Hercules tanker plane some 330 miles from their objective. After topping off their fuel, the Argentine pilots took a southeast course at a low altitude, maintaining full electronic silence. Their approach was stealthy, coming from an entirely unexpected direction. As the inbound attackers stabilized on the British raiders, they were a mere 28 miles out. The missile trap was compromised. HMS Ambuscade maneuvered to shield the Hermes from the impending assault. Invincible dispatched helicopters equipped with chaff decoys and deployed combat air patrol Harriers to intercept potential threats. The enemy aircraft dove and unleashed their deadly arsenal. Traveling at an astonishing 10 miles a minute, the missiles bore down on the British fleet, homing in on HMS Hermes. The official account paints a straightforward picture of the events that transpired. Allegedly, the enemy pilots had launched their attack from a remarkable distance of nearly 30 miles, mirroring the outcome of the May 4th incident. The Exocets, momentarily deceived by the chaff, eventually targeted the closest substantial vessel, SS Conveyor. Thus, the carriers remained undamaged. However, an inquiry led by a survivor from the Conveyor, supported by a declassified briefing paper dispatched by the Ministry of Defense to British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, hints at a more unsettling sequence of events. In this investigation, the arrangement of the ships deviated significantly, and Hermes doesn't find itself in the clear, contrary to Woodward's official assertion. Rather, the analysis suggests that the Exocets had already fixed their sights on Hermes. David Bass, a lookout on Hermes Bridge, recalls the moment vividly, quote, "I saw this white-hot glow on the horizon. Although I had never seen an Exocet, I knew what it was. The missile was coming towards Hermes. Suddenly, it bore to the right and hit Atlantic Conveyor. She went up in a big pall of smoke. In that critical juncture, Hermes executed a desperate maneuver, angling its long side away from the incoming projectiles. The investigation contends that simultaneously, Woodward issued an unforeseen directive to Conveyor to pivot port to 40 degrees, presenting her flank to the Exocets. The conclusion drawn from this report is stark. Conveyor was potentially sacrificed to shield Hermes, right as the missiles were on the brink of impact. Confronted with this assertion, Woodward remained steadfast in his denial, asserting that he would never have knowingly directed Conveyor into harm's way. Yet, intriguingly, his original official account conspicuously lacks mention of Hermes' evasive action and his specific commands. This omission provides ample fodder for conjecture and gives rise to the question of whether a grim tactical decision might have played a pivotal role in Britain's victory in the Falklands War. The 74-day conflict saw the British forces deploying a multitude of land, sea, and air operations, with many emanating from HMS Hermes. It culminated in a British triumph on June 14, 1982, as Argentine forces in the Falklands capitulated. The toll was profound: 649 Argentinians, 255 British military personnel, and 3 Falkland Islanders lost their lives. After serving in the Falklands, the Royal Navy offered to sell Hermes to Australia, which ultimately declined. In 1986, the Indian Navy acquired the storied vessel and renamed her the INS Virat. Controversy arose once again in 1988 when a magazine claimed that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi used the ship for a family vacation, but authorities disputed this. The ship continued with her peculiar and scandalous career, suffering a few minor accidents and numerous refits. By 2013, the aging vessel's maintenance costs grew, and talks of its decommissioning began. On March 6, 2017, after over 3 decades of service and more than 1 million kilometers sailed, INS Virat was officially retired, ending its legacy across 2 navies and taking the true account of what happened on May 25, 1982 with her.